If anybody can hear me, raise their hand. So Francesca, we had a talk. I had clients that wanted a Spanish-speaking agent, and anyhow, I still have some of those. So we still ought to talk. Ken can hear. That's good. Hopefully you can hear me. All right. And more people are coming. Brendan, well, good. Hello, Melinda. All right. So how many do we have online? 7. We have 5 times as many here.
I was gonna do online. I'm like, no, let me just go there.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, hi everybody. Today we're talking about the residential listing agreement, how to fill it out. I hope that's why you're here. So the starting point on a listing is typically RPR. And so if you were going to go on a listing appointment and you were going to want to fill out a listing contract, then the first place to begin is an RPR. And normally what you'd be doing is taking the address of the property and dropping it in RPR, and then letting RPR find the property. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a property that is in RPR. Notice it says, this is an extra bonus for those of you that are participating today. Notice that this property is off market. That means it's not in the MLS, which is what I needed for this particular demonstration. Also notice it's pre-foreclosure. There's a notice of default. Did you know that RPR can pull up notices of default? Did you know that? So let's say, and by the way, a notice of default might be somebody you would ask, do you want to sell your home? You know, rather than be dragged through the foreclosure process, thrown out of your house into the snowdrifts on Christmas Eve. Why don't we sell it, get some money, and move on? So I'm going to click on White Sands Road, off market, right? Not in the MLS. Now, to begin with, when I go on a listing appointment, and this is another class, we're going to do the different ways in which you can do a market analysis. There's 5 ways of valuing a property, but this already gives me an idea of what RPR thinks it's worth. What I want to do, because we're about writing a listing contract, I want to go over here to where it says Zip Forms Transactions. Now, MLS Connect is not going to work very well for a listing. And that's because MLS Connect connects you to the MLS. That's sort of obvious. And if it's a listing appointment, it's probably not on the MLS. If you're going on a listing appointment and it's on the MLS, we should talk, right? It's time to take the NAR Code of Ethics course again. But there's reasons you could do it. But anyhow, so this is not on the MLS, but we want to make it easy to get into Zip Form. So we're going to click on this. We're going to say start a new Zip Form transaction. We're going to select listing, and then we're going to select OK. And then we're going to go to Zip Form. And now Zip Forms, after one more click, is going to load that particular property. Eventually, momentarily. See, if everybody's online, I could just like stay home
And do it.
in Morgan Hill. So this is actually a nice little thing. If this is a purchase, you can start to fill this out, but this is not a purchase. What it has done, it being RPR, is it's already imported all this information, including the assessor's parcel number, the school district, legal description. That doesn't really come through very well. And it also might have the seller's information. There it is, seller's information. All of that was imported. We didn't have to, no heavy lifting, right? No sweating, no lifting. Now what we want to do, and if you've, on your template, if you've set it up so that it automatically applies to every new listing, then it would already have done this, but I haven't done that, so I can show you what a listing template would look like. So in your templates, you're going to want to create a listing template. And what you're going to do when you create that template, this is the list of the documents that I put into my listing template, right? If you send me $5, I'll send you the list. The big ones for signing people up is the listing agreement and the instructions to exclude the listing from the multiple listing service. The rest of these documents all come from the disclosure package. But what we want to do in our template is we want to click on the cover sheet or parties, and you want to make sure that all of your information and your office information has already been filled out in the template. So if you've done that, then we don't have to do it again, right? So if we've done that, let's go back to the list. That's what the template looks like. We're going to go back to our transactions. And my recommendation is to set it up so it automatically applies, but I just wanted to show you. And then what we're going to do is open the transaction. And I'm going to go over here where it says apply template. And I'm going to do the listing template. Again, you could set it up so that it does that automatically. The template has applied successfully. So now when we are going to fill out the form, it doesn't take very long, shouldn't, because a lot of the information should already be there. Let's see how much it got. Sometimes it's not as good. Like notice it has, there may have been more than one seller. I kind of thought there was. So we might need to go in and tweak the parties, right? To make sure that if there's two people, they're both there, that sort of thing. But right now we're not going to worry about that. But it's got all of my information, the office information, possible representation of more than one buyer or seller is everywhere. The wire fraud advisory is everywhere. And here we come to the residential listing agreement. If you remember from real estate school that there were all these different kinds of listings, forget about it. Virtually every listing is going to be an exclusive authorization and right to sell. Date prepared, even if I was going tomorrow, I could still click on this and say today's date. Not even sure what that's for. Exclusive right to sell, and we would, now this might be blank if I don't already know that we're signing the listing. But let's say I'm pretty confident. How long should we make the listing for? 6 months. 6 months sounds like a long time. How about 180 days?
Okay.
Does that sound better?
Yeah, okay.
All right. Or how about just 24 weeks? Right.
Even better.
Yeah, it sounds even better. And of course, some of you are already figured out those are all 6 months, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and today's the 8th. Why not? All right. Then it asks, notice that it's put in the APN, is it a manufactured home? If you click on this, other forms load. Is it part of a probate, conservatorship, guardianship? Click on that, other forms load. Listing price shall be. Now, if we are doing this in advance, that may not be filled out, right? But the idea is that even I did one of these the other day on my phone. Did you know the phone has a Zip Forms app, right? And I had already put in all of the hard stuff so that I could finish it on my phone because all I needed to do was put in the price. So and if I were going on the listing appointment, I would leave that blank because I don't know. But what did it say in RPR? Oh, there was a handout.
There's a handout.
She came early. So 1.5. All right. So just for fun, I'm going to put in 1,500,000. Right. And then listing terms, you probably should not be writing anything in that box. Just because there's a box doesn't mean you need to write something in. Compensation, notice the amount of rate of commissions is not fixed by law, set by each broker individually, may be negotiable between seller and broker. The California Civil Code requires that phrase, those words in Helvetica 10-point boldface type appear in any agreement that binds somebody to pay a real estate agent a commission. Now we're clicking on the percent. what is the commission, right? So are commissions negotiable? So could that mean going to 7 or 8 or 9? Isn't that negotiating?
Sure.
We can only negotiate down. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
We can't
negotiate
negotiate
up
up?
to.
All right. So one of the two things you need to know before you walk into a listing appointment is, this has to be relatively clear in your mind. Number one, what do you suggest that they list the home for? Right? That's the first thing. Now, those of you that have heard me talk about my pricing strategy, if I wanted 1.5, I might start lower, right? And if you're saying that that market isn't happening anymore, I just got countered last night on a offer that I wrote. There were 4 offers, right? And they all were beyond list price. Last week wrote an offer on a property for 980, sold for over 1,125,000, right? So if it's priced right, then you might go up. That's a whole different discussion, right? But you're going to need to be able to say a number. When they say to you, what do you suggest I list my home for? You're going to have to say a number, right? You're not going to be able to say, well, I don't. Now, I've actually done, sometimes I've gone there and I've said, well, look, I'm a professional, and if I were an appraiser, the appraiser would not say that number on the first look at the house, right? The appraiser, a professional, would look at the house first, then go do research, and then come back with a number. I've sold people on that idea, which was allowing me to stall to think of what the number ought to be, right? Because I wasn't sure. So you're going to need to know that number, right? The other thing you're going to need to know is how much you're going to charge for commission. Because after they say, well, what are the 2 things the seller wants to know? What do you think I should list my home for, and how much commission do you charge? When they say, so how much commission do you charge? This is not a time to stutter, sweat, wiggle, get nervous, look at your shoes, change the subject, right? You're going to need to say another number, right? Now, if that number for you might be 6%, it might be 5%, it might be 4%. The question is, how bad do you want the listing? And my theory is, if this is in a geographic farm, an area that I'm targeting, I'm going to get the listing, and I don't really care about the commission, right? I want my sign up in that neighborhood so I can do open houses and knock on people's doors and they can come and meet me, right? Later, when I've sold 12 homes in that neighborhood, I'm getting 6% because people perceive it, but I might start at a lower number. Let's say 5, right? Why not? Or I'm going to do this. I'm going to say 4 just for, there's a reason, you'll see, right? This is just an example, So then it says, or a dollar amount, you should not be writing anything in there, and you should not be writing anything in there. Right? I'm just saying, if you're writing something in those boxes, you're probably doing something wrong. So look at paragraph 3A1. 3A1 says, if during the listing period or any extension broker, how many ways could you get paid a commission? One says, if the broker finds a buyer, you get paid a commission. A cooperating broker finds the buyer, you get paid a commission. The seller or any other person, that's 3 and 4, finds a buyer, you get paid a commission. And procures a ready, willing, and able buyer who's offered to purchase the property and the price and terms is acceptable by seller, provided that the escrow resulting closes. Then you're going to see, those are 4 ways to get paid a commission. Look at paragraph 3. We're going to go back to 2. If without broker's prior written consent, the property is number 5, withdrawn from sale, 6 is conveyed, 7 is leased, rented, leased, or otherwise transferred or made unmarketable by a voluntary act of seller. Now, it's not on the screen, but what are the first words of the residential listing agreement? The first real words in the first real sentence. And the answer is, it says this is an exclusive and irrevocable right. for those of you who don't believe me, it says the exclusive and irrevocable right. See that? It's an exclusive and irrevocable right. What that means is that under the terms of this agreement, the seller does not have a right to cancel the contract, the listing. The seller does not have a right to tell you they don't like you and to take down your sign and go away. That is withdrawing the property from sale. All right? There's actually a whole bunch of ways of getting paid a commission. Paragraph 2 is one that is sort of a mystery paragraph. This is called the broker's protection clause or the broker's safety clause. And so we have a 180-day listing. And it's now day 178. It's Friday. And I'm showing the house to a buyer and they're really, really interested. But they tell me they want to think about it, pray about it over the weekend. And that they'll let me know on Monday. Does everybody see what my problem is? By Monday, I no longer have a listing on this property. And they might drive by the property on Monday and see that my for sale sign is down. They're going to go knock on the door. The owner answers the door and they're going to say, hey, we were here just last Friday looking at your house and we kind of wanted to buy it, but the sign is gone. Do you still want to sell your house? Right? And they say yes. Right? And they make a deal and you don't get paid. So what the safety clause says is that if I give the seller a list of people with whom I've been negotiating, written list is what it says, and any of them buy the property within, how about 90 days, right? I don't, by the way, I've been doing this for a really long time. I have never heard of anyone ever collecting anything on this paragraph, right? I'm just saying. Right, but it's right in, why not? 30 days, 90 days, I really don't care. Paragraph 3 we already covered, which says this is the irrevocable part, right? That's what this is saying. This is an irrevocable part. Paragraph B says if completion of the sale is prevented by a party other than seller, I guess that's the buyer. Basically what that says is if the buyer breaches and the seller gets to keep the buyer's deposit, the broker gets half of the money. Is that what it says? I think so. Compensation otherwise would have been earned under paragraph 3A shall be payable only if and when seller collects damages by suit, arbitration, settlement, and then an amount equal to lesser of 1/2 of the damages recovered. Which means that theoretically, if it's a 3% deposit, the buyer backs out and forfeits their deposit, you get 1/2. By the way, I have never known of anyone to have collected on that either. I'm just saying, right? It may be possible, but I was the vice president of a 600 agent group for 20 years and no one ever collected dime on those 2 paragraphs, but whatever. That's what it says. In addition, seller agrees to pay broker. You probably should not be writing anything in here either. What kinds of things were written in, sometimes, especially in short sales and or other kinds of administratively heavy kinds of transactions, they would, how many of you use a transaction coordinator? Maybe, how many of you would like to use a transaction coordinator? So could the seller pay for the transaction coordinator? Could you say if your transaction coordinator charges $350, seller agrees to pay $350 for transaction coordination? I'm just saying. I'm just saying. If you want to know why is that blank spot there, that would be an example. Otherwise, don't write anything in, right? Just because it's there does not mean you should write something in. Paragraph D, we're now getting to really important stuff. Broker is authorized to cooperate and compensate brokers participating through the multiple listing service by offering 2 MLS brokers specified in 3A, either or. Now, this is not always filled in. Why would an agent not fill it in? Well, I've told the owners that I'm going to sell their house for 4%. Here, it's asking me how much of the 4% I'm giving to the agent who represents the buyer. If you're the owner, would you like to see that to be a big or a small number?
Small number.
All right, and let me try this. So the agent who is finding the buyer for your house, bigger number. The agent who is listing the house, smaller number. So if you put down, I want 2 and they get 2, and you say that here, the owner might say, well, gee, don't the other agents usually get more than 2? Right? Wouldn't it be better if we offered them 3? Wouldn't it be better? Wouldn't they be more motivated to sell my house if we offered them 3? Right now, you understand you're now down to 1. So if I'm listing it for 6 or 5, I usually fill that out. If I'm not listing it for 6 or 5, I forget. You can forget. You know how busy you get. Sometimes you just forget to check those boxes, right? Because what that allows me to do is to put into the MLS, I get 1.5 and they get 2.5, right? You understand? Is that better than 3 and 1?
Yeah.
I got a 50% raise, right? By not committing. You were going to say something?
I was gonna say, well, isn't it usually like, I know it's better to get the buyer agent more, but don't we usually split?
Not necessarily. Usually when it's 4%, it's the listing side that takes the hit,
Yes, okay.
right? And the selling side takes less of a hit because many sellers know if they, I was at a broker meeting and there was a new home builder or a new home builder, and guess what they were telling everybody? You get 5% if anybody buys one of our homes,
Oh, wow.
right? You think agents I wrote down the address, right? You know, right?
Yeah.
Right, and I'm thinking, who do I know the ones that buy a $2 million, you know, all in Santa Cruz area, you know, who wants to do that? And I actually thought of somebody. So, but you understand that if you got into that discussion, this is not necessarily a discussion you want to get into if you don't have to, right? Who gets how much of the commission, right? But that's where you would say, but you don't have to. Brokers authorized and outside the MLS as per broker's policy, who cares? Seller irrevocably assigns the broker the above compensation from seller's funds from escrow. In other words, this is going to become part of the escrow instructions. Paragraph F is another mystery group of paragraphs. So if a house is already listed, we started with this concept. If the house is already listed, can I list it again? It's an active listing. It's going to expire in 2 weeks. Can I list it today? Active listing, listed by somebody else. It's expiring in 2 weeks. Can I go on a listing appointment today and list it? Even though it's still an active listing. Look at what paragraph F1 says. Seller represents that seller has not previously entered into a listing agreement with another broker, unless specified as follows. Now, the implication here is this form might be used with somebody who's already in a listing agreement with another broker. That's what it says. So you'd write in, yes, Remax, you know, expires. Seller warrants that seller has no obligation to pay compensation to any other broker regarding the property unless the property is transferred to any of the following individuals or entities. F2 is that broker safety protection clause paragraph. You understand? Remember, the broker safety clause says if I give them a list of people that I've been negotiating with and any of them buy the property, I get a commission. That's where the seller would type out those names. But look at paragraph 3. If the property is sold to anyone listed above during the time the seller is obligated to compensate another broker, broker is not entitled to compensation under this agreement. Broker is not obligated to represent seller in such transaction. So I could, let's say the property is already listed. The seller called me because they're mad at their agent. It's going to expire soon. The seller says, can you come over and talk to me now about putting the home on the market? Your answer should be yes. Now, what you would do if their listing is up, what is it, August 15th, you would start your listing at August 16th. And this form sort of acknowledges that that might be possible, right? You'll notice that when listings expired, some of them are immediately relisted with another agent. My question is, when did they do that? Midnight? They waited till 11:59, the day that the listing expired, went and knocked on their door and signed the paperwork between then and 1 o'clock. Do you think that's what happened? Or do you think they had already signed the paperwork before the thing expired? They already signed it, right? You just need to know that's not illegal, not unethical. That's what the form says. Now we're going on items excluded and included. I use this not because it's meaningful, except it gives us an opportunity to fill out the form. So by the way, we're going to do another class later on closing. And what closing means, getting people to sign forms. So if I say, I've talked to somebody on the phone, they said, come over and talk to me about selling my house. And the guy said, I want you to know I have no intention of listing my house that evening, right? I show up, they say, okay, that's fine, just as long as you understand we are not listing our house this evening. They listed their house that evening, right? And my theory is that it's hard to get people to sign forms if you haven't filled them out. So this is an easy thing to get them to help you fill out. And I would jump around. In other words, before I actually started filling out the whole form, I might ask them as they showed me the house, tell me which items you're going to keep and which ones you're going to let go. And they say, well, we definitely want to take the Tiffany lamp with us. And I would be here typing in Tiffany lamp. I would type in things, right? It gives me a soft way to start filling out the form, right? But this doesn't really matter because it's what the MLS says and what the purchase contract says that becomes important, right? More so the purchase contract. Items excluded. Leased or not owned items. So you've heard me, by the way, next Tuesday, we're having a presentation here on solar panels and all of the fun you can. We're going to let the light shine on the solar panel issues. All right. So if they have it, you want to mark those boxes. Multiple listing service broker is a participant subscriber to We're MLS Listings. Now, if this property is in Stockton, we are technically not a subscriber or participant in MetroList, but we have a reciprocal deal with them. What the purpose of this paragraph is to keep agents. There's a guy that had a listing in San Jose that I talked to, and he was in Huntington Beach, the agent, and he had listed the property in the Huntington Beach MLS. And then he was saying to me, I don't know why I don't get any calls from agents in San Jose. He was baffled, right? And I explained to him, because none of them know that your home is for sale because you listed it in the wrong MLS, right? Now, it's okay for you to list homes that are outside of your MLS, but you should know what a reciprocal listing is and how to set it up so it gets in the right MLS. Then this is a big paragraph that says it ought to go in the MLS. You ought not to sell it off market. You ought not to sell it to a friend or relative of the listing agent, right? You ought not to, this is what this all says, right? It's a long thing, but it says you ought to put it in the MLS. And the seller and the broker will initial that, yes, we've given them this. Now, what if somebody says, well, I can't sign the listing now because there's all this work I want to do and the place needs to be cleaned and has to be painted and I have the haulers coming over and all that other kind of stuff. What you say is, look, there are two issues here. One is, when do you want us to start working for you? That's not the same thing as when we show the house. Right? In order for me to begin the process of representing you and working on your behalf, you have to hire me. The state of California has a law that says somebody who represents a seller who's a real estate agent has to have a written agreement. Right? So, but that does not mean we're going to put your home on the MLS right away. And what we would be doing is checking this box. And by the way, this is a form I would always have handy, which is called the seller authorization to exclude from the MLS. And if we have time, we'll look at it. But basically, it's a form that says we're not putting it in the MLS right away. We're going to put it in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. If it goes on the MLS, it's going to be syndicated to a whole bunch of different sites. Right? This should be a good thing for them to hear. that Zillow and Redfin and Truly and Realtor.com and Homes.com and, you know, everybody is going to know. Yeah.
Question about that.
Yeah.
It's still not on Zillow, and I went on Zillow, and they didn't let me do it because it's already been on the MLS. It was Howard talked about it.
All right. Did you try putting in our MLS too?
Yes, they didn't let me do that because I already listed it, so I had to put a new listings.
Well, we'll talk about that later. I have listed things in more than one MLS.
Okay.
And I see listings that are in Metro List or Bay East, and here. I see that. It's possible. All right. So anyhow, it should be on the MLS. Everybody should know about it. Comment, all that stuff. Automated estimate of value. This is basically warning them. And they can click the seller opts out of certain internet features. Very few people do this, right? You understand, somebody who wants to sell their house, but they don't really want it on the internet is kind of missing the whole point. Right? Seller represents that seller is no notice of default, right? Look at this list. Any delinquent amounts on any loan. This is something you'd want to ask people, right? Any litigation, arbitration, or administrative action, government investigation, anything like that going on, I had to know about. If they haven't been paying their mortgage payment, by the way, and there's a notice of default, if there's a notice of default, we need special forms. It becomes more complicated. Not impossible, just there's another form. All right, if it's in bankruptcy, you can't sell it. Right, if they go into bankruptcy, you can't sell it. Conservatorship, receivership, you need to wait for the court to say you can. Broker and seller duties. Broker agrees to exercise reasonable effort. Usually people don't want you to explain every paragraph, but sometimes they do. Unless seller gives broker written instructions to the contrary, broker is authorized but not required to order reports and disclosures, including those in 7C as necessary. This is coming up. Advertise and market the property by any method and in any mediums selected by broker, including the MLS and the internet. By the way, if you're the listing agent, so I'm the listing agent and you call me up and you say, hey, I have a buyer, my buyer is interested in making an offer on the property. Do you have any offers? Yes. Yet. And I say, yes, I have 4. And then you, of course, would like to know, how high are they? Is it legal for me as the listing agent to tell you? Ethical? Allowed? Legal? Is it ethical? No, not.
Because you're driving the price up, right?
Right. So it's ethical or not ethical?
What is it? I don't know. Not ethical.
We don't know. And I'm going to say it's ethical. And look at paragraph, this one down here. Disclose to any real estate licensee making an inquiry the receipt of any offers on the property and the offering price of such offers. The residential listing agreement gives you permission to disclose the number of and the amounts of any offers received on the property. Now, I have learned not to debate listing agents if I represent the buyer, right? Because I've had listing agents say it's illegal, immoral, unethical. I could lose my real estate license if I told you the amount of the highest offer. That's idiotic.
That's probably what their broker told them.
That's kind of, many real estate agents have learned real estate on the street, you know, out on the street. Well, so-and-so told me that you can't do it, so apparently you can't do it. Well, I don't know. And by the way, this is not a new clause. It's been there. There are videos of me going through this decades old, and the clause was there. Agents always say this, when did they add that? Well, about 1990, right, is when they added that. Seller agrees to consider offers. You're going to want a termite report, you're going to want a property inspection, and you're going to want HOA docs. And if there are others, you can write them in. What might be an other? I've been showing property up in God's country, the Santa Cruz Mountains, Scotts Valley, Felton, Bonnie Doon, right? This is septic tank, well, and propane country. So you might have a septic inspection. You might have a well inspection. You might have a roof inspection, right? You might have a pool inspection, but we would write them in. We want the seller, and the seller will want to get these inspections before they put the property on the market. Agency relationships, possible dual agency with buyer. Do you think the seller would like you to try and find a buyer for the house? I think that if you ask them, why did you hire an agent? They're going to say, to find a buyer for my house. Would they like your broker to try to find a buyer for the house? Sure. This says we're going to probably try and find a buyer, and we might find one. And in which case, we will be representing both the buyer and the seller, right? You can read that, if you have, I don't know. It may be necessary, appropriate for broker to act as an agent for both seller and buyer, exchange party, or one or other additional parties. Broker shall, as soon as practical, disclose to seller any election to act as a dual agent. Well, that's what it says. Confirmation, we're moving down the form. Broker shall confirm the agency relationship. This is done in the RPA in the first, pretty much the first paragraph. Other buyers and sellers, there's a form which we're going to get to. We've already mentioned it. It came and went. The possible representation of more than one buyer or seller form. Security, insurance, showings, audio, and video. Do they have an alarm system? Do they have cameras? Do they have hidden cameras? It is illegal. It causes issues if the sellers have hidden cameras and recording equipment in their home and they're recording buyers and agents in the property. Unless they have a sign that says we have audio and video recording equipment and we're recording audio and video of people in the property. I'm just saying. If they do that, you need a sign. By the way, if you represent a buyer, and I may be paranoid, but just because I'm paranoid, that doesn't mean I don't have real enemies. You understand? If people are really out to get you, being paranoid is just good thinking. When I'm showing homes, I'm looking around, right? Because there have been times where there's this little camera, right? And when I walk further and I'm talking to clients, all of a sudden I see the screen, the recording, and all that other kind of stuff. You understand, you may not want to have the discussion, well, we're going to offer $755, but we'd be willing to go up to $790, right? In the house, right? While they're recording you. And I'm just saying. And it talks about nanny cams and things like that. Should they take away anything that could easily be stolen from the property? Jewelry, if they have guns and stuff, they should have a safe, they should do something. Can you watch everybody in every room at an open house? No. If they have narcotics, if they have drugs, if they have, right, you understand what I'm saying. This is a discussion you need to have. I have another thing where once you've listed the home, you want to, let me just say it. We're going to take all those other disclosures, the TDS, the SPQ, the statewide buyer and seller advisory, the market. We're going to take all that stuff. But when you're on the listing appointment, my recommendation is as soon as they're interested in signing the listing agreement, sign the listing agreement and get out of there. Do not stay there and talk. Don't chat. Get out of there, right? Because what sometimes happens is the more you talk, they think of reasons not to put their home on the market right now. Right. And so you leave them a stack of stuff, get out of there. So and then make an appointment to go back and go through all of the disclosures and all the other things, right? List it and leave. I'm just saying. Photographs and internet marketing. You shouldn't be checking boxes here because if you're checking the boxes, you're saying you don't want photographs and you don't want internet marketing. People, when I'm looking at where to do open houses, you know, one of the things I look at when I'm looking at the listing, how many photos do they have? Because I know this, if it says 5, this is probably a dog. If it says 50 photos, somebody's proud of this house, right? So buyers are attracted to listings that have more photos and videos and all that kind of stuff. And so if you don't want to be a secret agent, you don't want to have a secret listing, right? I've had people say, I don't want a for sale sign and I don't want it on the internet. I don't want my neighbors to know. And I'm like, well, you're going to move at midnight, right? Right? People think you're a drug dealer because people keep driving up, going in, leaving, you know, and you don't have a for sale sign, right? People are going to wonder what and that will make it much more difficult. A lockbox, you should have one. Anything that gets in the way of showing the property should be avoided if you want to get. How do you get the most money possible when you're selling your house? And the answer is to expose the property to the greatest number of potentially qualified buyers, right? And it's like buying a dress or shoes or a suit. If you went to a store and you found exactly the right dress or shoes or suit that you were looking for, it's the right color, the right style, the right fit, you would probably be willing to pay more to own that dress or shoes or suit than the one next to it that doesn't fit so good, right? You understand? The one that fits the best, you'll pay more to own. That's what we're trying to do with the buyer. You do want to net the most money possible, don't you, when you sell your home? In order to do that, we have to expose it to the greatest number of potential buyers. And if I'm a busy agent, I had this happen 2 weeks ago where they didn't have a lockbox and the agent was only doing a half of an open house and the seller didn't want the property to be shown during the week. We never saw it and made an offer on another home, right? If I'm an agent and by the way, I have an export when I'm showing properties. This is another class that shows all the showing instructions, the vacant ones, the ones that say go direct, the ones that say call first, then you can use the lockbox. We know we can show those. The ones that say by appointment only, tenant by appointment only. All right, that'll be the last one we ever look at. Right? So I'm just saying, there should be a for sale sign. Yeah, sometimes you should do what you can. We're not going to go through the REO or the short sale or the trust advisory or a replacement property. We're not going to do that now. Management approval, I've never had a manager not approve a listing. Just saying. Mediation and arbitration is here for them to, mediation is there and additional terms. Entire agreement. Ownership, title, and authority. Seller warrants that seller is the owner of the property. Now, those of you that have watched my working with investor class know that you could actually do this before somebody owns the property. I have magic words. But nobody else has title to the property and the seller has the authority to execute this agreement. Exceptions are as follows. So what you want to do is to make sure that the person who's signing the listing agreement actually has the authority to sign the listing agreement.
I'm sorry, I thought you started one.
It's always at noon.
Okay, sorry about that.
I mean, sometimes the Thursday ones, depending on the title company, but mine are always at noon.
But this is the continuation of what we were doing?
No, it's not. This is a totally different class.
Okay, all right.
So representative capacity is, let's say it's in a trust, a family trust, right? An inter vivos trust. It's a copy of the real listing agreement. Then if it's in a trust, we will be checking the representative capacity box and that will launch another form, which is the representative capacity signature disclosure form, right? It's, by the way, this is very common that the property might be in a trust of some sort, right? If so, you'd click on that box. Information for them to sign, the seller, us. Notice 2 brokers with different companies are co-listing the property. There's a additional broker addendum, ABA. I actually had an agent tell one of the people I'm coaching, she was from another company, that it's illegal to co-list from different companies. And that, of course, is a bunch of, what's untrue, let's just say. Right. And so you would have an additional signature. Let me just cover this. Additional signatures addendum would be used if you have more than 2 sellers. Representative capacity would be used if it's in a trust, corporation, LLC, more than 2 sellers, additional signature addendum. more than 2 brokers, the additional broker addendum. I would go through the seller advisory. It would be good for you to read, even if your seller doesn't. You'll find that many of the engineers read everything. General disclosure duties, basically what paragraph 2A says is that the seller should tell the buyer everything the seller thinks is wrong with the property. Now, what will typically happen is they'll say things like, well, there's a dog a few doors down that barks sometimes at night. Should I disclose that? And you would say, yes. They say, I had one say that one of the neighbors, when he's washing his car, sprays me with water when I'm walking by. Should I disclose that? Yes.
Everything.
Virtually anything they bring up, the answer is yes. If they brought it up, the answer is yes. I'm just saying. Now, the seller property questionnaire is going to ask them those questions, right? Loud noises at night, people drive and make, yes, right? Those questions are asked on the seller property questionnaire. Statutory duties, we're going to order natural hazard disclosure. I like property ID. Property ID is going to come and speak to us. Their lawyer is going to come and speak to us. Not all NHDs are the same. I'm just saying, right? Just saying. But the law requires that the seller tell the buyer if the property is in a fire, flood, or earthquake zone. It is legal for the seller. There's a CAR form you could have the seller fill out and sign answering that question, right? Which you could, from a Google search on the internet, find the answer to. However, if you're wrong, you're going to be sued. Whereas the NHD company has insurance. And so for, how much does an NHD report cost?
$99, $100. Sorry about that.
So you're going to want the full, complete, that means with environmental NHD. The full, complete with environmental NHD. Most of the NHD companies throw that into their package now. Some of them, it's a $25 or something like that add-on, you want it. And the reason you want it is because if you don't have it, and I'm representing the buyer, I'm going to ask for the environmental hazards. And when I get it, I have a reason to back out of the transaction, right? Whereas if you ran it in advance and included it in the package you give, then they already know what's in it. Paragraph 2 talks about the little booklets. Those of you that made my contingency thing, there are certain things that you're supposed to give to the buyer, including this earthquake safety guide, all that stuff. It's a part of our disclosure package, and I'm going to be doing disclosures coming up soon. I have to look at my calendar. But we're going to go through that. You want to get a signed receipt of all those things from the buyer when they make the offer. Mellow roofs and that sort of stuff, this is paragraph 3, is found typically in the preliminary title report. Tax disclosures, special tax disclosures are usually found in the NHD report. Part of your learning about real estate is to learn about NHDs, natural hazard disclosures, what's covered, all those different things. Has anyone died in the property in the last 3 years? If the answer is yes, the seller has an affirmative duty to disclose that. By affirmative duty, it means that they're going to be asked that question on the SPQ and they're going to have to say yes. If it's been more than 3 years, they do not have an affirmative duty to say anything about it, but if they're asked, they cannot lie. So let's say somebody died 5 years ago and the buyer asks, has anyone ever died in the property? You have to tell them the truth. If somebody died in the last 3 years, you have to tell them that whether they ask or not. It gives some people, I think the technical term is the willies, right? When they're living in a house that somebody died in. I don't know. I actually I had a person die in my listing, in the listing on Blossom Avenue, right off of, right where we were at near Merriman's, right down that street. I had a listing and a tenant was living in the property. And I got a call from an agent that said they couldn't show it because it was locked from the inside. So I drive over and there's a pickup truck in the driveway and it's locked from the inside. And then I get a call from a company saying that their employee has not showed up to work in a couple of days. And that they drove over to the address they had given him, which was the address of my listing, and they saw his truck parked outside and he's not answering his cell phone or answering the door. At this point, I called the police, right? You understand, somebody's going to need to break the door and there's probably a dead body. I also called the owner, right, of the property and told him that I think somebody died in your house. And so the police came and broke the door and went in and they found him and he was dead. So I'm selling the property. By the way, that night at 11:30 at night, I got to meet the widow and children at the house to pick up his belongings. Right? I pointed out to my seller that this was a little bit more than typical for a listing. And then I double-ended it, which is I guess the good news of the story. And so I'm telling the buyer, the husband had just gotten out of the Air Force, and I'm walking him around. And you're saying this wasn't 2 years ago. This was 2 weeks ago, right? And I right there, 2 weeks ago, the tenant died. I go, oh, all right. So then the wife comes up from San Diego. They sign all the forms, buy the house. It closes. A year later, he's being relocated. I'm listing the house. And so I'm meeting the wife and I'm listing the house. And I said, and of course, we're going to have to tell about the person who died in the bedroom. And the wife says, what person that died in the bedroom? And she's looking at the husband he's looking at his shoes. And then she looks at me and I said, well, there was a tenant who died, in the house before you purchased it. And then she said, which room? And he again he's very interested in his shoes. And I said, first bedroom on the left. And she said, the nursery. And he's of course saying, well, why mention it? What difference does it make? I knew it would bother you. So yeah, right now that might be an award-winning. I've had people die in the listing, right? But if it's a probate, I did a lot of probates. A lot of times people died in the listing, right? That's and people would want to see a death certificate if I told them they died in the hospital, right? I'm not kidding, right? To some people, this is a huge deal, right? This is a huge deal, right? And so you have to tell them about that. If it's in the condominium or a common interest division, you need to get the HOA documents and you need to get them to the buyer and the listing agent, the buyer's agent as soon as possible. Withholding taxes, I don't really go into that. Government required replacements and alterations. They don't have very many of these around here. Some counties in California have requirements that you upgrade your insulation when you sell a house. Los Angeles. Some down in LA and in other parts of Southern California, they have a rule that if you're selling your house, you have to have a minimum amount of insulation in order to cut down on heating or mostly cooling costs. But we don't really have very many of those around here, but you're supposed to know if we do. Lead paint, renovation, repair, and painting rule. If the property was built before 1978, it almost undoubtedly has lead-based paint. Most old paint has lead in it, right? And this is explaining that could be a problem. And, but yeah, by the way, I have a lead paint inspector. Pre-marketing and conditions. Look at what they've underlined. Many people are not aware of defects or problems with their own property. One way to make yourself aware is to obtain professional inspections prior to sale. Pre-sale inspections may include a general property inspection, wood destroying pests and organisms, inspection of the septic or wells, among others. I explained to sellers that getting all these inspections and reports in advance is going to save them tens of thousands of dollars easily when they're selling their home. When I'm representing buyers and there aren't the property and the termite and the other inspections, what I tell the buyer is there's good news about that. And the good news is they're not expecting a non-contingent offer. right? In order for the buyer to make a non-contingent offer, they would need a termite property and the other inspections. And if the seller doesn't have it, it means the offer is going to be contingent on the buyer getting them. The good news for the seller could be the buyer will pay for them. The bad news is they're going to ask you for credit for anything they find. Right? And now you're in the middle of a real estate transaction. You're in escrow. The property has been moved from active to pending status. Do you really want to start all over? Go back to open houses, put it back on the market, right? You're going to be in a weaker position in the middle of escrow. And my experience is the two things that keep escrows from closing are, number one, buyer's failure to get financing, and number two, arguing over repairs, right? Those are the two reasons that escrows do not close.
Can I interject something real quickly? It just seems that in the San Jose, or in our area, not just San Jose, but the Bay Area, the sellers tend to do the inspections.
Not always.
But it's been my experience.
Right,
Okay.
recently, yes.
Okay, but now like in Sacramento, Elk Grove, Roseville, they don't do it.
That's right. So as you'll learn as you move outside of, we're different, right? You go to Hollister and they are doing the real estate business more like it was done 20 years ago. You get out of the Bay Area where you end up with agents that don't have inspections. They don't have, I mean, it's just, it's old school.
So I experienced it on both sides down there. Once I was representing the seller, we did it.
Yeah.
You know, so they can come back and say, you did everything.
Yeah.
And then the other side, another time in Roseville, I was representing the buyer. House was in great shape,
Yeah.
but it had been, it had had two realtors. It had been on for a long time. And there was really not very much. I'd say maybe $1,000. I got it reduced by $95,000. You know, so it really does help.
Yeah. So you ought to get the inspections and the reports if you represent the seller. It's really the best thing to do. The other reason for doing it is it possible that the seller isn't going to be great maybe at the SPQ and the TDS, and they might forget something. They might miss something, right? Oh, yes, the dishwasher does leak sometimes down, you know. Now, if it says in the transfer disclosure statement, we're going to go through disclosure, there's a place for you to check a box that all of the inspections and reports are incorporated into the seller's disclosures about the property. So it doesn't matter that the seller missed the leak under the house because if the property inspector saw it, right? You understand? And that is incorporated into the seller's disclosure, which this is what the paragraph says. You may not be aware of defects or problems in your property, right? Do you want to meet lawyers afterwards? Do you want to go to small claims court? Do you want to have to hire? We don't want post-sales protections, home warranties. If I list a home, I have to admit I didn't on my last one because it was a tear down. But if I list a home, I want the seller to have a seller's coverage during the listing period. Many real estate agents don't even know that that exists. What seller's coverage means is that if something breaks during the listing period, it's subject to the home warranty. On my listing appointment, I take home warranty brochures. And I've had clients look at it and say, no, thanks. I don't care. I opt out. And then the heater broke, right? And then the heater broke. And I didn't say, I told you so, because you don't really have to. Look what happens the other way around. So you don't mention it. You don't talk about it. The heater breaks. And of course, you're going to say to the seller, well, you're going to have to fix the heater. You know, nothing we can do, right? You can't sell a house without a good heater. So the seller is at work. And a buddy says to the seller, so how's the sale of your home going? And the seller says, not that great. The heater broke and I have to go buy. I have to spend $1,500 to fix the heater. And the friend at work says, well, why didn't you just call the home warranty company? When I sold my home, we had a home warranty and my dishwasher broke, and for $50 they came out and fixed it. Why didn't you just do that? And the guy says, well, I didn't even know I could. And the friend says, well, of course you can. So the guy calls you up and he says, why don't we submit it to the home warranty company, my broken heater? And then you say, well, we don't have a home warranty. And I thought I could have a home warranty during the listing period. And you're like, yeah, but we don't have one. And then they are going to say, if you had told me that I could have a home warranty, I would have bought it. The only reason, do you understand who's going to end up helping them fix the heater? You are. If you mention it to them, show them the brochure and explain the advantages, and they say no, you're in a very different position when the heater breaks, right?
But you can get it, we can get it for $1 a day.
That's right. But most real estate agents do not put the home warranty on the property during the listing period. I'm telling you, very few actually do it.
Yeah, for $1 a day.
For $1 a day, right. The other advantage of this is that I tell sellers you ought to buy a home warranty for the buyer. And they're like, well, why should I do it? And I said, because you don't want to go to small claims courts, right? And if you have a home warranty, and I actually say this, whether this is true for every office, including ours, if you have a home warranty, it reduces the E&O deductible. Did you know that? And I actually tell clients that. I tell them what E&O is, and I say, unfortunately, it doesn't protect you, only me. And if there's a home warranty, our deductible is less. Guess why? And the answer is because if something breaks, it can be inexpensively fixed. That means I don't get sued. It also means you don't get sued, right? The other reason why I want to pick the home warranty, I want it on the seller, and I want to pick the one for the buyer, because whoever picks the home warranty, that name of that agent is on marketing materials that is sent to that client. And your buyer will start getting my stuff about the home warranty. And when they call to have something fixed, they're going to let me know, and I'm going to get credit for the home warranty, not the buyer's agent, right? And I had, we're making an offer on a $1.5 million property, and they countered out the $500 home warranty, the seller did. 1.5 million, they countered the $500 home warranty. How dare you ask for us to pay for that? Okay. All right. Anyhow, safety precautions, that's sort of, self-explanatory. The other one I'm going to quickly do, I guess I'm over. If I were you, I would also, I'll just do this. It'll take a minute. This is the seller authorization to exclude from the MLS. Listing agreement, oops, didn't want that. Where happened to it? Back. Oh, that was not what I wanted it to do. Maybe it was telling me, so listing agreement, it's time to stop talking. It doesn't want me to click on that box. Dated, today's date, MLS, you put it in. And down here is, do not submit the property for a period of so many calendar days. Do not submit the property until a certain date. Do not submit the property during the entire length, right? By the way, you can change this. When you filled out this form, what happens then? So you get the seller to sign this form. What happens then? Anyone? All right, so this is the seller instruction to exclude the listing from the MLS. You filled out the form, the seller has signed it. What do you do now? Right? Submit it, send the form to the MLS. We don't do that anymore. Right? There's no send the form to the MLS anymore. You can send the form to the MLS, but you'll just irritate them. When you go to the MLS and you click on listings, add listing, it's going to give you three choices. A real listing, a coming soon listing, and a exclusion listing. And what they don't want the form. What they want you to do is to log into the website and fill out the information that it's an exclusion, right? Because then they don't want you to email them a copy of the form. They don't want you to fax them a copy of the form. They don't want you to mail them a copy of the form. They want you to go online into the MLS and put it in as an exclusion, because then they know, right, without having to look at the form. I'm just saying, if you call the MLS and ask them, do you want the form? They're going to say no. Just go into the MLS and pick exclusion.
So when you do that, it's just saying that you're not going to submit that form?
Right. It's like you're basically communicating what the form says to the MLS.
Did that just recently change or something?
years ago.
Really?
So if I were in the MLS and I were to go to Pro over here, in a way, and I went to manage listings, and I'm going to demonstrate, and then we're going to be done. I went to manage listings. I hate that little pop-up. Add a listing, new exclusion. And I click on it, and then it goes through pretty much the process, except what I'm doing is telling them I have an exclusion. And then it wants me to answer the information, which is sort of the same information that's on that form. But they don't want the form. They want you to go online, manage listings, add new exclusion, put it in, keep the form. They might ask to see it, but they don't really, I've never heard of them ask to see it. All right, that's it. I hope you guys had fun. Next week, Tuesday, we're going to talk about solar panel. We're having all that sort of stuff.
That's on the 13th?
Something else, that's on Tuesday.